questions of our identity and our history are exploding into significance. We are seeing arguments both within nations and between nations. Our need to grapple with a wider variety of perspectives has never been greater. The legacies of empires are shaping the 21st century's problems in the most profound ways. We are, after all, in the first empire-free millennium since ancient times, and yet the world remains in the throes of a Great Imperial Hangover. Some imperial legacies are tangible, for example, shaping our borders and determining the composition of our populations. Other imperial legacies are attitudinal, for example, in the ways in which different histories of conquest or subjugation affect present generations. I can empathise with a history of conquest and how it might have caused humiliation cascading down through the generations. And yet my pride in being British means I also understand how a country might be imbued by a great sense of confidence because its recent forefathers had been successful empire builders. Now, I'm not here to pick sides in divisive debates. I've written this book in order to convey the importance of understanding a wider range of imperial inheritances, whether in our own countries or further afield around the world. Imperial legacies are everywhere. Empires have existed for so long that we are only just getting used to their absence. I distinguish between the old formal empires of conquest and direct occupation that existed before the Common Era and that continue to exist right into the 20th century until the collapse of the European colonial maritime empires and, in 1991, of the landed colossus, the Soviet Union. Today, we have informal empires of political and economic dominance, for example, those that have been forged by the USA and China. The Great Imperial Hangover embarks on a world tour, taking into account the different post-imperial experiences of Europe, Asia, America, the Middle East and Africa. I examine how the USA refashioned the very notion of empire in the 20th century and why it still struggles with the legacies of slavery today. How the UK is trapped between the guilt and the grandeur of its own sweeping imperial past. How the European Union, itself a post-imperial project, still has to contend with some of the challenges of empire. How Russia's rulers have embraced their own imperial inheritance. How China has arisen in a way today that emulates its grand old imperial history. How India has risen through the Mughal and the British imperial eras to its present state. How the Middle East still deals with some of the cascading legacies from the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. And how Africa still scrambles beyond the legacies of colonialism. I do not think that we are entering a new imperial age. Rather, that world order comprises of a number of different post-imperial legacies. When these different legacies collide, whether within nations or between nations, misunderstandings, friction, and even war can be the result. We are not habitually raised with the stories of other people's histories, which is why it can take real effort to see the world through other people's eyes. Sometimes, understanding what is different between us can be essential to fostering a more harmonious world. And often, there are no greater differences than our varied imperial inheritances.